Welcome to Better Odds Sports Betting. Here's our hosts, Kev O'Neill and Kyle Hunter.
Welcome back to Better Odds Sports Betting. I'm your host, Kev O'Neill. Kyle is on hiatus today, but that's okay because we are joined by a fantastic and very well-known handicapper, Mr. Ian Cameron, host of Pub Sports Radio, the Ice Guys Hockey Betting Show. You can follow him on Twitter at Bobano. Nice, easy little Twitter handle right there, as you can see. How the heck you doing, Ian?
I'm doing great, Kiev. It's good to be with you again here on the show, and give my regards to Kyle, a good friend of mine in the industry. And yeah, it's great to be back. Merry Christmas to you, to all the viewers of the show. And it's a very busy time of year, of course. You've got NFL, you've got college football bowls, NBA, college basketball, NHL daily slates. So lots to keep you busy as a handicapper and a sports bettor these days.
The grind doesn't end, does it, man? And it's just all kinds of sports to look at. Now, the way I say it is just do what you can. Don't get overwhelmed. Don't feel like you have to do everything. And just small doses is what I try to tell people. It's a challenging time of year, too, because it's a stressful time of year. You got your Christmas to think about. And that's kind of why we're doing the show today instead of tomorrow. But really awesome to have you back. And we have some exciting bowl games coming up. We have a big NFL slate that starts on Saturday with some little craziness to some of the numbers, and I can't wait to get into that. But before we jump into college football, Ian, I'd like to ask you, what is different about capping the bowl season compared to the regular season for maybe some novice people that want to get going in the industry?
Well, for as long as I've been doing this, which is now shockingly 12 years full time, I mean, can't believe it's been that long. You've always had to gauge motivation. You've had to gauge who's excited to be in their particular bowl game and which teams are not as excited to be in their particular bowl game. That's always been one of the main factors. But I think as times are changing here in the college football landscape, what's been one of the biggest changes we've seen the last year or two? The transfer portal. And all of a sudden, you're seeing all kinds of examples with all college football teams of players deciding to leave for another program right after the regular season, leaving their status for the bowl game up in the air. In a lot of cases, that means they're not playing in the bowl game. That's certainly something, consideration for keeping yourself healthy, especially if you're going to be involved in the upcoming NFL draft class. So you're seeing a lot of more opt-outs the last few years in bowl games, more than it was, say, 10 years ago. There's no question about it. And now you add in the transfer portal activity, that's going on as well. I mean, you've really got to do your best and due diligence to stay on top of player transactions and player movement, prior to these bowl games. And there's going to be plenty of examples of it in the bowl games to come. So I think that's the biggest difference, handicapping bowl season to the regular season, is it's motivation. It's which teams are going to care about their bowl game and want to win, and who's going there just for a vacation, so to speak. I think there's an example of that maybe on Christmas Eve. If I'm reading the tea leaves properly, I think we might have an example of that with that Hawaii Bowl coming up that we'll talk about. But definitely motivation, and certainly who's in, who's out. Opt-outs are playing a big role in these bowl games, and the status of, who's going to be on the field for these teams. And of course, also the transfer portal, with players jumping ship to another program just basically right after the regular season wraps up.
It is insane. I agree with all your points that you said. It is an art much more than a science now, because power ratings can almost be tossed out in these situations. There's a lot of motivation, and I almost think that, we used to be safe when we were betting like the smaller schools, because usually you wouldn't get them sitting out. Now they're transferring too. It's almost changed to that, hasn't it?
Yeah, it definitely has. There's no question. And again, this is just something, you've just got to stay on top of it. It's going to be changing. And I think another thing that's worth noting is, used to be, you'd look at the opening lines, you'd say, this number's off. Or I know this team's really coming to play in this bowl game. I don't know about the opponent that they're playing. Let's fire away and bet this thing right away. Can't really do that as much anymore, because a lot of the times now in these bowl games, we're seeing these announcements like basically a day or two before the bowl games, and all of a sudden, there's a bunch of players sitting out. I remember there was a handful of bowl games last year where just all of a sudden, a day or two before the bowl game, the quarterback's out, a couple of receivers are decided not to play, some key personnel maybe on the defensive side of the football not playing. You've really got to be careful about, hey, while you want to get the best of the number, which is always the most important thing, in sports betting, you also want to be aware of the fact that, you could be caught in a situation where you bet a good number on the side, and then all of a sudden you get some kind of info about this guy's out, a slew of starters are not going to play. Then all of a sudden it changes things rapidly. So my philosophy now is bet most of the bowl games closer to the day of the game more than ever before. Because that's not the way I always did it a few years ago. I didn't mind firing away on a January 1st, January 2nd bowl game, mid-December, when the lines first came out. Now I find I've got to, pump the brakes a little bit. Let's make sure we get the player personnel information correct, and let's see if we can revisit betting this game much closer to kickoff.
Absolutely. And then you can have to factor in the weather as well. A lot of, thank goodness, bowl games are played in nicer states, nicer areas, but there's still a few of them out there that are very susceptible to the cold. So we'll get into that as well. But great breakdown, great analysis. Agree with everything you said there. Let's get into a couple of these games then. We might as well start out with Friday. We got the Gasparilla Bowl with Missouri versus Wake Forest. Wake Forest probably on -2, actually. I had written down -1 before, but now it's up to -2 in most books. Total around 60 and a half. So, this is an interesting bowl because I think that Missouri was a very good SEC team. I think they're really happy to make the bowl game. But Wake Forest is a situation where they had a terrible finish to their year, and I want to see if they're going to be motivated here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think for this game, Wake Forest, that's the concern I have. They didn't finish the season strong. They limped to the finish line with losses to Louisville, NC State, North Carolina, and Duke down the stretch. The only victory they notched was against a Syracuse team that kind of flatlined ever since they lost to Clemson. Remember, Syracuse was an undefeated football team. They lost to Clemson, and basically the season just fell apart for them after that. They also had to deal with it. There's Schrader, the quarterback, was injured a little bit, but nevertheless wasn't the same Syracuse team after they lost that first game. That's the only team that Wake Forest beat down the stretch. I think when you look at this matchup, motivation's not a question, in my opinion, for Missouri. Because they basically had to win their last 2 games of the regular season to get to 6 wins, get to bowl eligibility. They did that. I mean, you look at the way they competed and the way they found a way to win in their finale against Arkansas the day after Thanksgiving. You could tell that was a team that played with purpose. That's a team that looked like, hey, that's a team that wants to go bowling. That's a team that wanted to get to that 6th win. And what I think was the biggest difference in Missouri this year was, remember last year, they couldn't stop anybody on the defensive side of the football. Yeah. Horrendous defensive football team. They've made incredible strides on that side of the ball. If you look at all their numbers, yards per pass, yards per rush allowed, total yards per game allowed per play, all of those numbers better this year. And it was actually the offense that was kind of lagging behind, but we started to see Brady Cook at quarterback and the offense start to play a little bit better down the stretch. So it's more of a well-rounded team this year. I think they're fired up to be in a bowl game because they played their tails off to get here, to get to 6-6, to get to bowl eligibility. Wake will be, I think Wake will be interested. Sam Hartman probably will, because he made the decision to play in this game, in spite of the fact that he's probably going to the NFL draft following this game. He's definitely not going back to Wake. They said he was mulling his options between either the draft or maybe transferring to another school, but he's definitely not back at Wake. This will be his last game regardless as a Wake Forest quarterback. So I'm sure he's fired up, but the team wasn't playing great down the stretch. I know Missouri's excited to be here. I like the Missouri side a little bit here, small underdog.
And that's the first thing I looked at was Missouri, and I almost played it. I was going to play it, but now I'm seeing more and more opt-outs coming from Missouri here, which really worry me. Some of their main guys on offense and defense are dropping. It's hard to say that Wake Forest is going to be that motivated, but I feel that Sam Hartman has a lot to prove. And, I feel like Missouri kind of got it done at the end of their season to get to a bowl game, and we're satisfied with it. It's almost like Wake Forest is some unfinished business. But what I will say is that Clausen has not been a good ATS bowl coach. He's only 3-5 against the spread in bowls. Eli Drinkwitz only has 1 bowl, but he's 1-0 against the spread in the bowl game. Missouri does have a slight, if you're going to look at metrics, net yard per play advantage of like 0.15. They definitely had the harder strength of schedule, being in the SEC and all. But God, I keep going back and forth on this one. I'm probably, for myself, going to stay away from it. It's interesting that the total actually did drop a little bit more to 59, and I wonder why that would be, but possibly because of the receivers opting out. So sounds like you like Missouri a little bit. So we'll
I do, and I think the thing that you mentioned about the strength of schedule is valid. Wake Forest pretty weak in that regard, and you look at Missouri. You played Florida, you played Georgia, you actually covered in both of those games, even though you lost straight up. You played Kentucky, who was a pretty good defensive team. It was kind of disappointing, actually, what we saw to Will Levis and the offense, considering all the hype that he got as a quarterback coming into the season. And then Tennessee. So they played a pretty rugged schedule here, Missouri, and definitely maybe sets them up for a good success here in the bowl game. You're right about the late opt-outs for Missouri, something to monitor, but definitely Missouri in pocket already. We can always make the decision, too, as to jump off this side, but I bet it early. It's one of the ones I was pretty sure, Missouri would be locked in full bore here, but now we're starting to see a couple of their players, especially on offense, may not play, opting out for this game. So it changes things a little bit, but I still think I would still rather have Missouri here in this game as a slight dog than Wake as a slight favorite.
Well, fair enough. Let's move on to the next game then. The Independence Bowl, Houston versus Louisiana. Louisiana's +7. Total is 58, Ian. This is in Shreveport, Louisiana. I kind of thought that maybe it would be more of a home field for Louisiana, but they're the same distance from Houston. Houston's pretty close to Louisiana. I always do the math on every single school when it comes to their bowl game. If it's, not over 400 or 500 miles away, then I don't bother. But if it's somewhere in between, like a drive or a quick plane flight, then I like to know who's going to have more of a home field. Michael DeSormo is 1-0 against the spread in bowl games. Dana Holgerson, 2-7 against the spread in bowl games. He has been terrible. But, I just made a play in this game finally, and there's reason for it. It's because quarterback Ben Wooldridge missed the last 2 games, and it doesn't look like he's going to be playing for Louisiana. They had a backup in, which was okay. But Michael Jefferson, their top receiver by far, like the guy, it wasn't like close second or third, is opting out of this game. And that kind of tells me, well, now you have Clayton Tune that's played his whole career here at Houston, probably wanting to finish strong and maybe even throw his hat into possibly a walk-on. God forbid being a guy like Brock Purdy that got the last pick of the draft. That's looking pretty good in the NFL right now. Tune's last opportunity, Houston's got the 0.66 net yards per play advantage. Without the opt-outs of Jefferson and the injury to Woodridge, I had this about a 7.5 point spread, but I have to punish them. I have Houston -10. I played it at 7 for 1.5 stars, a small play. What are your thoughts, Ian?
Yeah, this one, there are concerns. There are red flags with ULL. You're right about the opt-outs. It's concerning on the offensive side of the football. And you're right. You look at the production level receiver and the rest of the receivers on that passing game. And the passing game was never great. It's a huge here in this bowl game. That being said, I'm honestly not excited about laying 7 with Houston and the bowl track record of Dana Holgerson, a team I faded a lot this year. Actually, the Houston was absolutely pathetic compared to the expectations people had of the Houston Cougars coming in team last year. What happened to it this year? It was just horrendous for the most part. It almost looks like an anomaly. I don't know what East Carolina did the day that Houston beat them 42-3 from the defense. Every other game, they give up 36 to Temple. They give up 37 to Tulsa in the season finale, losing outright as 13-point favorites. They give up 77 in that crazy pinball machine type game, 77-60. It's been a horrible defense. It's been a coach that's been very bad in the bowl season, although I will say they did win a cover last year against Auburn in their bowl game. So that is something you do want to keep in mind. They were win in that game. I'm not excited about laying 7. I was really liking ULL initially, and the reason I liked them a lot initially is because I don't think the drop off from Wooldridge to that great. I think Chandler Fields is very capable. You see, he came in as the starting quarterback the last 2 games. He played relatively well in both of those games. His passing numbers were good, 10 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, not bad. Protected the football. I don't think Wooldridge was ever the kind of quarterback where I'm saying if he's out of the lineup for ULL. I think Chandler Fields is capable. I actually think this could be an overlook as well. If you actually look, you talked about who's missing on offense potentially for ULL, including the top receiver. The defensive opt-outs are that it looks like aren't going to play here for the Cajuns in this game. You look at the departures to the NFL draft, defensive end Andre Jones, who's been terrific for them. There's a bunch that are going to be missing on the defensive side, it looks like, for ULL. So the over actually might get there because I don't think the drop-off from Wooldridge to Chandler Fields is all that huge, all that significant. I think the ULL can still move the ball in this game against that really leaky Houston defense. But you mentioned it on the other side, the Houston offense, the team. They still played well down the stretch. They've still got, who's going to play. And the fact that they have Tank Dell, the all-world receiver for Houston, playing in this game, significant for them as well. So they will be loaded for bear on offense, and that may be going against that ULL team missing some players on defense. Maybe the pass rush not quite as good, certainly without Jones on the field. So I think I could get there with an overlook in this game as well, with the total sitting at 56.5, 57. Now, it's a little wind, pretty cold for Shreveport, Louisiana in late December. So some concern, and I think that's why the under is taking money here. It's more weather related. But I'm certainly not excited about an under with this Houston defense, Kiev. I'll tell you that right now.
No, that's that Houston defense could give up some yards. I just think that Louisiana should be outclassed technically. It's so funny. You're right. The Houston massively disappointed this year. Everyone's darling to beat Cincinnati and win the American Athletic Conference, and all of a sudden Tulane sneaks in there. That was fun. I'm really happy for Tulane this year, but no, I'm going to stick with my play at -7 for Houston. But I certainly don't disagree taking a look at
preaching to the choir, my friend, with favorite teams this year, because I took the win total over for them. I had a small difference, although I had more on Cincinnati. I wish I had put small bet, but I just thought at the price, that to be a month Willie Fritz did with the Tulane Green Wave. They were a point spread undervalued from start to finish in the betting markets. Those are the kind of teams you just love in college football. And every year you'll find those teams. You'll find those 1 or 2 teams that they just go under and long, and the betting markets just never catch it. Dismal year last. I lost a ton of close games on that football team, and then the turnaround this year. What a job by Willie Fritz. Turn them around from that. A great turnaround year. AAC champions in a big-time bowl game, the Cotton Bowl against USC. Outstanding coaching job there.
Absolutely. Don't disagree with that. That's a massive comeback after they lost their coach there. Let's move on to Christmas Eve, my friends. The Hawaii Bowl. Middle Tennessee State versus San Diego State. San Diego State's -7 total is 49.5. I thought that Middle Tennessee States might not be all that motivated. I think they're going to party, and I would if I was a kid, if I was going to Hawaii, man. Now, the San Diego State side of things, the way I look at it is more business. I mean, they already live in a paradise, for one. And number two, they go to Hawaii a lot anyway. It's I hear that they went early, though. Brady Hoke did mention that, and they're probably having some fun, but I think they'll get serious at the end. I don't like Rick Stockstill at 3-6 ATS in bowl games. I think that's terrible. Brady Hoke is 2-3-1. Neither of these coaches have performed all that well. Now, San Diego State's got the greater strength of schedule, but and obviously a small net yards per play advantage. But laying points with a terrible offensive team like San Diego State is not exactly what I'm looking to do. This total actually creeped down to 48.5. A lot of people are looking at the under. I think a team total on Middle Tennessee State under is possible because I don't like Middle Tennessee State ranking 13th in tempo. I think that just could give San Diego State more opportunity to score, but I do like San Diego State's defense. So I'm going to lean the team total under Middle Tennessee State. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would look at some kind of bet on San Diego State in this game, whether it's team total over, as you mentioned. That's not a bad Tennessee State team total under, or just laying the points with San Diego State. I actually San Diego State here 6.5 is I didn't get the best of the number here, but 6.5 is doable. I don't think too much of Conference USA these days when it comes to college football. I think them and the MAC have had rough seasons. I think the Sun Belt's a better conference than those two. And I think when you look at it here with Middle Tennessee defense at times this year, talked about defenses that weren't very good. I mean, we saw them give up 28 points to Florida International, barely win that football game in their finale. Obviously, a horrendous Florida International program. The Middle Tennessee defensive numbers, not exactly pretty this year in terms of 5.6 yards per play. I mean, they got absolutely shredded both on the ground and through the air, almost 300 passing yards through the air. And that's significant because quarterback that can throw the ball a bit. Jalen Maiden here for San Diego State, he's actually a lot better in terms of being a pocket passer than How many years have we gone with San Diego State where they haven't had anybody that can throw a lick downfield in the vertical passing game? How many years now have we seen that? And Braxton Burmeister was a disaster early this season for San Diego State trying to throw that football. At least with Jalen Maiden, they've got some element of throwing the ball downfield, testing the secondary of the opposing team. He's got a little athleticism and mobile element to him as well. And San Diego State really got going down the stretch. You mentioned the strength of schedule advantage as well for the Aztecs. They won 3 of their last 4 games down the stretch. Now you could argue, UNLV, San Jose State, New Mexico, pretty soft schedule. But they almost beat Fresno State. Let's not forget that. And in fact, they should have won that game. They basically coughed it up. In the final few minutes of that game. It was a horrendous loss. They probably should have in that game. And keep in mind, Jake Haener was back at quarterback for Fresno. So that was a full-strength Fresno team with their quarterback under center. They nearly beat them. So they were very good down the stretch. They did have a tough loss to Air Force, very good Air Force team in their finale. Air Force, I think, one of their better defenses. So the fact San Diego State's offense got shut down doesn't worry me too much here because Middle Tennessee can't compare to Air Force on the defensive side of the football. And I think it's very important to point out the point you made about San Diego State goes to Hawaii in a Mountain West Conference road game. Every other year they're making the trip to Hawaii to face San Diego State on the road. So this becomes a team that's familiar with this trip, familiar with these surroundings, maybe isn't going to look at it like wow, this is Hawaii. Let's have some fun. Let's just party and let's just make it a vacation. No, they've been here before. It's not that big of a deal. It's like, all right, make the trip to Hawaii. I think it is more of a business trip, a workman-like attitude, get a win here attitude for San Diego State. Meanwhile, the Middle Tennessee kids, I know they're not suffering through the cold that people in the Northeast and Midwest are, but it's not exactly balmy in terms of conditions there. The opportunity for them to go to Hawaii on this trip, it does feel like there could be more distractions for Stockstill's team and the Blue Raiders compared to the Aztecs. So I would look at the favorite here in this one. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so you're looking at I don't disagree with there. I actually put also I would lean to San Diego State in this situation for the motivational things that I did talk about. So good call on that one. Let's move on to Monday. We'll get you through to Monday here. Then we'll go to the NFL. December 26th, we have the Quick Lane Bowl, New Mexico State versus Bowling Green. Bowling Green's -2. The total of this is 47.5. Start time, 2:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN in Ford Field, Detroit, Michigan. So I have a play on this, Ian. I made it early, though. This spread is creeping up, and I probably should do up. Bowling Green's -3.5. So I have to mention that the spreads move pretty quickly from what I wrote down, and we have to make our adjustments when that happens. The total's 48.5. This has moved from a play to a lean, unfortunately, but I'll let you know my thoughts. I took Bowling Green was plus money, like +1 or 2 a while ago. Jerry Kill is just a terrible bowl coach. Looking at my notes here, he's been 1-5 against the spread. He's been killing your tickets if you've been betting on Jerry Kill here. I looked at some of the metrics, and it says Bowling Green or New Mexico State's is better than Bowling Green's, but their strength of schedule has been absolutely terrible. Their only somewhat quality win is Liberty. It was just a bad spot for Liberty, and I don't even know how to properly grade that. It was just such a big difference in strength of schedule. Diego Paiva is the better quarterback. I have Bowling Green power rated more. I'm not seeing a lot of sit-outs for Bowling Green, and here's the deal. This is close to home. Now, are they motivated? They're going to Detroit. It's not like they get to go party and go somewhere fun like Boca Raton, but at least they made a bowl game. It's been ages since Bowling Green has made a bowl game, and I think that's going to motivate them. 83 miles away, that's an hour and 20-minute drive to get to this bowl game for any fans that still remain in the Ohio, Detroit, Michigan type area. I think Bowling Green's going to have a good home field advantage here. And I took them, at plus money. Now at 3.5, I would just say if you want to take them, the money line would be the only look. I'm not going to lay 3.5 on this MAC team, but I think a money line play might be worth it.
Someone is going to have to explain to me what happened to Bowling Green's offense this year. I thought this offense would be great. I really did. Matt McDonald's been here forever, or is a veteran quarterback. I thought their offensive line was in very good shape coming into the season. They got weapons, both running the ball, throwing it. I thought they were going to be much improved offensively. They had all the elements of being a much improved offense, and it didn't click for them much of the season. I mean, their games, they got held to 17 to Miami. Buffalo, they only scored 7. Western Michigan, they only put up 13, 6 points against Kent State, 14 in the finale against Ohio. Really, the only game they exploded offensively was against the eventual MAC champions, Toledo, in that 42-35 victory they had as 15-point dogs. That being said, this feels like a spot where the offense can get things going a little bit. I mean, New Mexico State defensively, they're actually, if you look at the numbers for New Mexico State defensively, it's going to show that they're the 33rd ranked team in terms of total yards per game, 14th in terms of pass defense, 80th against the run. They're not that good. Okay. It was basically all schedule related. I mean, the New Mexico State, that's going to be the big factor here that's concerning if you're going to take New Mexico State, is the strength of schedule. I mean, you played Valpo, you played Lamar, you played UMass. Your wins were Hawaii, New Mexico, UMass, Lamar, Liberty was a good win, but Liberty, I think, checked out in that game, if you ask me, when they lost to Liberty 49-14. There were a couple of duds down the stretch for Liberty. The UConn game, this game against New Mexico State. I think New Mexico State kind of took advantage of that, and then they throttled Valpo, not even a Division I or an FBS team in their final game. So very weak strength of schedule for New Mexico State in terms of their victories. I think they're excited to be here, but it's kind of a conflicting argument with the track record that you mentioned of Jerry Kill, going back to all the other stops he had in his coaching career, Minnesota, Northern Illinois, where, his bull track record there wasn't really that great. You mentioned the ATS numbers. I think New Mexico State's fired up. I mean, this has been a bad program. They get to be in a bowl game. They get to, Detroit's not a glamorous location, but nevertheless, they get to go to a bowl game, get away a little bit. Whereas for Bowling Green, it's another cold weather city. I think at 3.5, I'm tempted by New Mexico State. I really am at the current number, but it's tough because I don't know if this team's played anybody good. The strength of schedule is concerning. I think what I might look at too, I'm leaning New Mexico State. I might pull the trigger on it for a small play. I think the over's worth a look. I mean, you're talking about a total here in the 40s, 48.5 right now. Bowling Green, I know offensively, they've definitely underwhelmed. Not as good as I thought they would be coming into the year, but I think they've got the chance with the extra bowl practices. This is still an offense with some talent and a veteran quarterback leading it against a defense that can give up some points. Let's not forget, New Mexico State gave up 45 in a game to Missouri this year, 66 to Wisconsin. They had some ugly numbers defensively, and a lot of their good defensive numbers came against the likes of Valpo and Lamar and UMass and New Mexico and brutal offensive football teams. So, I think it's a game where they can move the ball, Bowling Green. And I remember the first game of the year I took New Mexico State. So many people did. They were big dogs against Nevada, who were completely rebuilding this year. And they didn't win. They didn't cover. And I was screaming at my television, this Diego Pavia kid, how erratic he was and how many turnovers he was committing. I'm like, this guy stinks here. He's terrible. Yet he's gotten better as the season's progressed. And I think he played some of his best football down the stretch for the Aggies. And I think against the up and down Bowling Green defense, he can lead this offense to moving the ball and putting up some points indoors, Ford Field. Weather won't be a factor. I think the over's worth a look at 48.5. Low total. Both offenses do enough to get you there.
I don't disagree with that at all. And you got to it before I did. So I was going to, suggest the over. But, you at least have a controlled environment there, being in a dome, like Baylor versus Air Force today. A lot of money came in on Air Force. That there's going to be like 20 to 30 mile per hour winds at the Armed Forces Bowl. And it's going to be like 16 degrees. So that's just an example of what the weather can do to some of these situations. Awesome sauce, man. Let's move on to the NFL then. And obviously, same deal. Weather, Ian. It's coming in hard. I advise people to play teasers, especially on these low totals. I think there's a lot of teaser opportunities here. Laying points in this situation it's not certainly the sexy thing to do. Now, even one game I just can't see the Bears covering is against Buffalo, I guess, but still crazier things have happened in these games. And then you saw the Bears did cover against the Eagles last week, but man, it's just, I would hate to lay over 6-7 points in any of these situations, and a lot of money's coming in. What are your thoughts on the challenges of the weekend coming into NFL football, Ian?
Well, definitely the big headline story, which we talked about before the show, is this is going to be the coldest weekend in the NFL, top to bottom, in 20 years from the looks of it. Like, we're looking at sub-zero temperatures, gusty winds in a lot of venues, especially the Midwest and the Northeast, and you're seeing a bunch of totals in these weather-impacted venues already bet heavily down towards the under. We've seen heavy under money in a bunch of the Thursday night game, Jacksonville and the New York Jets. New Orleans, Cleveland has gone 6-point move to the under. We've seen Buffalo, Chicago take a lot of under money. Another city that's going to have cold and potential wind this weekend. Tennessee, same thing, although some of that too with Ryan Tannehill out and Malik Willis being the quarterback. I think that plays a part in the under move in that Titans and Texans game. Atlanta, Baltimore, another venue where we've seen a lot of under money, 41 down to 35.5, all because of the cold weather and the wind. That being said, you've got to have more to it than just that. You've still got to handicap offense versus defense, injuries, take all of that into account. And sometimes, when I find the totals have moved a little bit too low, I'll actually try to make a case for the over if it really falls to a point where I think it's just too low at this point in time. I mean, we're talking 32 and 32.5 for example, with the Cleveland game. But I also remember, Kiev, some of these games in Cleveland, we've seen multiple examples of that stadium playing like a wind tunnel or a wind vortex. And those games really, really have been low scoring. Like, we've seen 10-3, 10-7, those kind of games in Cleveland when the wind starts whipping up there. So I'm not saying don't bet the under. You still could get there. But you are talking 32, extremely low, where you could always get turnovers and fumbles and those kind of things, defensive touchdowns, special team scores. That always could ruin things when you're talking about totals that are that low in the low 30s.
Absolutely. It certainly can completely throw you off. I just shared my screen there, and there's a lot of low totals. The Saints, Browns, like you said, 32. Atlanta Falcons, Baltimore Ravens, 35.5. Bears, Bills, 39.5. Even the Bears are considered an over team. The Bills score at will, and they're sitting here at 39.5. That's pretty low. So keep that in mind. You gave me a group of games. We got about time for about 3 of them. Let's do the Giants, Minnesota. This is one that's in a dome, obviously. It's in Minnesota. This was getting close to 3, and then some syndicates hit one side, and it's kind of up to 4.5 now. So I think you might have some feelings on this. I'm curious to what they were, Ian. What are your thoughts on the Giants versus Minnesota? Minnesota minus 4.5 with the total of 48.
So I spent the first half of the season backing the New York Giants quite a bit. Just thinking, this team is going to be simply better because they've got a competent head coach. in place in Brian Dable, who I think very highly of him, especially when you compare to the likes of Pat Shermer and Joe Judge and Ben McAdoo and some of these horrendous coaches they've had there for the New York Giants in the past. And look, he's done already a magnificent job with this team. Let's be honest. I mean, this is an offensive line that is mediocre, below average at best. This is a receiving core that is very thin, and it's been riddled with injuries all season long. It's really Darius Slayton and a bunch of no-names really on this receiving core right now for the Giants. The offensive line's had issues. Their secondary's been banged up. They've played without Adoree Jackson, one of their best cornerbacks, multiple games here down the stretch. And yet they've held it together. Obviously, as the schedule's gotten tougher here the last few games, we've seen the Giants go on a little bit of a skid. And you start to wonder, maybe, it's catching up to them. The fact that they, from an offensive standpoint, that's devoid of talent, devoid of a sturdy O-line, devoid of a depth of receiver, devoid of issues in the secondary, that it's just catching up to them and the schedule getting tougher. But they got a huge win last Sunday night against Washington. It was a huge game in the division for both teams for their playoff hopes. And I think it's a buy sign again on the Giants. And certainly you look at the spot from a Minnesota perspective. You just pulled off the largest comeback in NFL history last week against the Indianapolis Colts, 33-0 down, and you come back and you win that game in overtime. How much gas is left in the tank for you? It clinched the division. You can't catch Philadelphia. Philadelphia is going to be the number one seed in the NFC. So what is at stake here essentially for Minnesota? It feels like a big time, tough spot to get yourself back up again after pulling that huge comeback. Giants catching points here. It's a huge game for them. Every game's important right now. Must win doesn't equal will win. I will caution everybody on that. You can't just bet a team because it's a must win or it's an important game. This is just as much bet on Giants after getting some confidence in a much needed win. Bet against Minnesota after pulling off the comeback of a lifetime. And it's also fading a Minnesota team as favorites with a woeful defense. Like their defense has been bad the last several weeks. I mean, Ed Donatel is on the hot seat right now. There's people that I know that are Vikings fans that want them to make a change at defensive coordinator, at the end of the season. It's been a defense that has not been good for a long time now. And I don't love laying points with defenses that can't get stops, can't get off the field on third down, giving up big plays, which the Minnesota Vikings have done repeatedly. So I'm on the Giants here with the points. Indoors, we should see some points in this game. I think Daniel Jones has had a sneaky good season. People are going to bash him left and right, makes mistakes. He fumbles too much. You're not going to win big games with this guy. But if you look at his numbers overall this season, they're really good numbers. He's protected the football. He had 12 touchdowns and 4 interceptions going into last week against Washington. His completion rate's in the high 60s. He's really having a solid season considering the O-line problems. It's not a great O-line. The receiving, how thin it is. They have no quality depth there. He's had a solid season for the Giants, all things considered. So I like the G-men in this spot. He have plus the points.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. It's funny. I was kind of thinking if this gets down to 3, I might play Minnesota, but I still wasn't really happy about my thoughts. And the reason is because my number's 3.8 on this game. Minnesota, whenever they're in control in the lead, they just choke. I mean, they just choke the game up. But when they're down, they come back completely. It's like a Jekyll and Hyde. It's like they could be playing the easiest football team in the nation.
Remember how they played the Jets a few weeks ago at home, and they were up comfortably most of the game, and then all of a sudden the Jets chip away, and they almost take that game from Minnesota.
They should have lost that game, and of course, because I was on the Jets. But I mean, the Jets were 1 for 6 in the red zone. That was Mike White's first real kind of game out of there, and they had him driving down the field just fine. They just didn't have anything in the red zone for him, and I thought Mike White was a much better quarterback than Zach Wilson minus the red zone situation. Yeah, actually, he might be better than him than that, but we'll see a little bit more about that tonight. I can't back the Vikings. Now it's 4.5. My lean switches from what it was earlier in the week now to the Giants here. The Giants are a desperate team. The Giants are potentially going to be making the playoffs. I know the Giants are really beat up, and that is, the things that's part of the reason that's kind of kept me off them. But they did get Williams back, I believe, and I think that is a big boost to their team. He's listed as questionable, Leonard Williams, but I think he plays. Kayvon Thibodeau, I believe, plays. They're a little bit banged up in the corners, but not super worried about that against Cousins, who can't just seem to pull away from anybody. For me, it's going to be a stay away probably, but I don't disagree with you at all. I think the Giants put up enough. And hey, who's the biggest backdoor team of the whole season this year? Probably the Giants, right, Ian?
No doubt about it. They've been a great point spread team, and I always said to people all season, wait till Brian Dable gets a greater level of receiving talent. Wait till the offensive line gets upgraded more. Wait till all that happens, and
Yeah.
then the Giants are really going to be a force to be reckoned with.
Absolutely. So before we get to the next game, I just want to throw out for our listeners some the teaser games. Jacksonville's a teaser game now. You can tease them all the way up to 8.5. Totals 36. Buffalo Bills -8. Take them down to -2 right now. Very teasable. You can even look at the Patriots here. Low total of 41. I know it's +3. But this is just another situation. If you don't like the Patriots, I personally like the Patriots when I was at 3.5. But this is a potentially teasable one. The Panthers at +2.5 is a teasable one. I mean, there's just so many teasable options here, going past the 3, 6, and 7 here. The Saints +2.5 to 8.5. Ravens are out of teaser territory now. The Niners are a consideration now. A lot of people say it's got to be 7.5. I think that this will be at 7.5 when it closes. So I would say you could tease the the 49ers down. The Raiders +2.5 on a low total of 38. I mean, there's just so many options here to tease. The Tampa Bay Bucks is a teaser. So I'm a big fan of these teasers this week. And I think it's a great way to go now that the numbers have settled down, Ian.
Yeah, no question about that. And when you're talking teasers, again, you want the +1.5 to +2.5, or the -7.5 to -8.5. Why do you want to tease it with those numbers specifically? Because you get all three sets of key numbers going for you, working for you in your favor: the 3, the 6, and the 7. It covers all of
100%.
those key numbers, and that's why we always everybody talks about this. When you're betting teasers, the 6-point teasers, you want the -7.5 to -8.5 range with the favorite teased down, and you want the +1.5 to +2.5 range with the underdog teased up, so you hit all those key numbers.
100%. Let's pick another game. And you gave me this one. I'm really interested to see what angle you have on this. It's Washington versus San Francisco. It's another non-big weather issue game. It's warmer in San Francisco, as you know. So the spread's at 7, and the total's at low 37.5, just due to the straight defenses here. I find it really interesting that Chase Young is finally back for the Commanders here. Maybe that's part of your angle. I'm curious to what you have to say about this one.
Yeah, I think in this matchup, it's a very fascinating here. Certainly, Washington's up against it, right? There's no question about that. It's a team that's definitely up against the wall, if you will, back against the wall after losing to the Giants last week. San Francisco's rolling right now. But doesn't it feel like this is your land 7 here? You're off the big win against Tom Brady and the Bucks. You're off the big win against Seattle in the divisional road game last week. It feels like this is a more important game for Washington. They're playing with their season on the line, essentially, right here. They're getting a good amount of points. I could see them hanging around a little bit in this spot. Washington plus points against San Francisco. I lean that way. I haven't bet this game. Not sure I will. Not sure I want to step in front of San Francisco, to be quite honest, because they've been impressive. Their defense, they're looking like a Super Bowl caliber defense right now, the San Francisco 49ers. It's been extremely impressive to watch it the last couple of weeks. They got a lot of mistakes out of Geno Smith, and of course, they made Tom Brady look as bad as he could possibly look a couple weeks ago against the Bucks. Brock Purdy, you know what I like about his situation? Brock Purdy doesn't have to do everything. He's got a good offensive line. He's got a great coaching staff and a great offensive-minded coaching staff. He's got George Kittle. He's got Christian McCaffrey. And what a trade that turned out to be for the 49ers. He stayed healthy, and he's showing you he's one of the top running backs in the NFL, one of the best pass-catching running backs in the NFL, can do everything for you in that offense. It's been fun to watch this offense with Purdy at quarterback. It's tough to step in the Niners' way, Kiev, but to me, it's a commander spot. It's a much more important victory for them that they need it badly. San Francisco's probably coasting to winning the NFC West at this point. I mean, they're definitely going to take it now over Seattle. Seattle, if they had any hope, they had to beat San Francisco last week. They didn't do that. So I think Washington certainly is a more important game for them. They're catching a good amount of points. Spot-wise, it's definitely Eileen Commanders.
Yeah, it's so funny. I've been kind of wondering. So I faded the Niners last week against Seattle, and it was because of the quarterback shows up great the first game, and he's a young quarterback. I think he's just because it's so damn easy over there, man. It's just he's getting clean pockets. He hasn't been challenged. But if one thing that Seattle can't do, that Washington can do is pass rush, and that's now they got Chase Young with Montez Sweat right there. It's like that's the recipe to getting to a young quarterback like Purdy, and this could be a very flat spot for San Francisco. And you need a lot more than just a prediction of a flat spot. But, look at last week's numbers. Washington wasn't even really beaten by the Giants. They beat themselves. It was Heineke fumbling on the goal line a couple times, interception, whatever else he did there. It was more than they beat themselves. I even think that this was one of my misleading final scores was the Commanders versus the Giants, where the Commanders were actually outgained them by a decent amount. So if there's a team that could get to the Niners, it's a team with a pass rush. And now with Chase Young back there, they could surprise the Niners and kind of get them. Heineke isn't a good quarterback, but sometimes he has his moments where,
He's better than Carson Wentz. That's all that matters with that Washington team, because they're playing with spirit and enthusiasm and Sanders offense with Taylor Heineke under center. Whereas when Wentz is under center, Kiev, I'll say this right now, it's almost like, oh, here we go again. Here's another interception. Here's another chance to win the game, and Carson's not going to get it done. I mean, honestly, that is – and there was a quote I read from Terry McLaurin, the great receiver for the Commanders, right after Heineke took the job, took over as the starting quarterback this year from Wentz. And he said, we just want to go out and play hard for this guy. He lays it all out there on the field, every snap, every game, every play. We just want to do our part to help this guy and make plays for him. Do you think they're saying that crap for Carson Wentz? Not a chance they are, because they know this guy was struggling. He couldn't play. He was making horrible decisions. They see, at least with Heineke, is he perfect? Is he flawed? Does he make his own mistakes? Yes. But they also see he's an ultra competitor. He's fiery. I don't think you get that out of Carson Wentz either. And I think the team has responded, and they've not that they didn't play hard with Wentz, but they've really responded nicely to Heineke, and I think it shows.
Jesus Christ, you're going to talk me into Washington play here. I'm going to wait because I don't think this goes to 6.5. I think this is going to maybe even touch the 7.5 in a few books, just because of the perception of the Niners, and that's what I'm going to fire. So I did tease the Niners down to 1 with 1 or 2 teasers. So just to let you know, I'd be fishing for a middle on this. But when you're looking in the totals of the 30s, you really have a decent shot at a middle in this situation. So that's what I'm probably going to do here. And in the contest, I'm going to definitely have to think about it a little bit more here. I watched that -7 here. So it is a big spread for the NFL. Let's
By
quickly.
the way, I mentioned Kittle and McCaffrey for a reason, Kiev. We're talking about San Francisco's offense. I mean, those are the players you got to target with props. There is no doubt Brock Purdy is locking into his tight end and his running back out of the backfield catching the football.
Especially with Deebo Samuel.
Your prop looks have to start with those two guys.
Yeah, with Deebo Samuel out, Kittle was a beast last week, and why would you not hit him again? He's going to have probably wide receiver type numbers, and as long as Purdy can throw the ball, obviously, this is just such an interesting situation. Being that they're a little bit hurt, I would definitely go with the tight end a lot quicker than I would with a receiver and a prop play for the 49ers in this situation. Miami versus Green Bay. You wrote this one down. The spread's kind of been falling towards Green Bay's side. Green Bay's desperate. Miami's embarrassed. Miami probably went through the biggest gauntlet of their schedule, and having to go to San Fran Chargers and then the Bills. That wasn't fun. All road teams. Now they're at home laying points. I think Miami personally might be a little bit of a fraudulent team. they've been terrible the last 5 weeks. What are your thoughts on this?
Fascinating. I mean, this football game, I mean, you've got Green Bay with new life now. Now, they need a mini Christmas miracle here to make the playoffs. I mean, they've got to basically keep winning, and they need a whole lot of help, if they're going to make the playoffs at this point. But the fact is, they go into this game thinking there's a chance. Are you telling me there's a chance? The old Dumb and Dumber line. They've got a chance at the very least. And how much do you really say, wow, Green Bay's back because they beat, just an absolutely depleted LA Rams team at home off a bye week, plus off a bye week. Let's not forget that, off a late season bye week that they took on a very ravaged LA Rams team that was coming off really a miracle comeback against the Raiders, because the Raiders essentially said, hey, we don't want to win this game, LA Rams. Here you go. You can take this game. That's pretty much why, the LA Rams won that game. It's just the Raiders gave it to them. Down the stretch, penalties, horrible defense on the final drive. The Rams then against Green Bay off the bye week, a much different story. I mean, Green Bay's pass rush was very good. And I'll say this about the offense. Aaron Rodgers is finally getting chemistry and finally getting confidence with his young receiving core. And even the old stalwart, Randall Cobb, made some nice plays in that game, but especially Christian Watson. And now that they got the kid out of Nevada, who I watched for years, Romeo Doubs, who was terrific in that offense with Carson Strong, who was the quarterback there for a very long time. That duo of receivers is coming of age now for Green Bay, and he's starting to develop a great rapport with both of them. So that's a dangerous thing for a Miami defense that we know has been erratic. We haven't exactly trusted them. We know they've given up big plays in the passing game. That's definitely something that would concern me here, because the Green Bay offense slowly but surely is starting to find their footing. And thank goodness Matt LaFleur, the light flicked on his brain, saying, let's run the football a little bit more. Let's take some pressure off Rodgers. Let's give the ball to Aaron Jones. Let's give the ball to A.J. Dillon. And look what happened against the Rams. They had success just handing the ball off to those two guys. So I like that they had more balance in their offense. I think that's going to be critical for them as they make the trip down to Miami. Miami's certainly going to be happy to be back home. I mean, 3 straight road games. It's a rarity in the National Football League, coming off the cold weather snow game in Buffalo last week. They'll definitely be happy to be back home, looking to bounce back after 3 straight losses. I think it's a really challenging game from a side perspective, but I like the total here. The number's already moved up. I agree. Green Bay, I think, is starting to get some offensive continuity, chemistry, rhythm going in the offense. They've now put up, when you look at it, 33, 28, and 24 points in their last 3 games. They're getting better and better and more confident on that side of the ball. Miami's defense has given up 32 and 33, 2 of their last 3 football games. And they've been trending over the total as well. Down in Miami, you won't have cold weather to deal with, won't have snow, won't have much precipitation at all. Wind shouldn't be a factor. I think the game goes over the total. I think both offenses have their share of success.
Yeah, and that thing went up from like 46.5, 47, 48, 49 when I did my show yesterday.
That opening number, I actually thought that was far too low, because we've seen Miami, Kiev, in the 50s in some of their games. The Chargers game, I remember, closed 55. And yet this one opened 40. I thought 46, and at the opener was just far too low.
I say look for the 50.5. It's a key number at 51 here. You want to get below the 51. I think that's important. So you got to look for that. This is one of the best weather games of the weekend. So if there's an over you're looking at, it might be this one.
This is one, yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely don't disagree. I forgot to bring this up to you, but we always pick a dog at the end of the show that's most likely to win outright. And I have one in my mind, and it might surprise some people, but I'll go first since I didn't warn you. And if there's anything 3.5 or better that you like, we'd love to hear it. And you already kind of said the Giants, so maybe that will be yours. I'm going with the Eagles.
I like that one too.
I got to tell you,
the mustache man can play. I'm telling you.
There's just a lot of situations that make me like the Eagles. First of all, I'm not saying that Jalen Hurts is a system quarterback. I think he's better than that. And there's early in his career, they were saying that. I think that though he is in a good system, and I think you can this is kind of like your situation where you put Brock Purdy in with the Niners. Well, you got someone that's probably better than Purdy, and you're putting him on the Eagles. Is that a bad thing? I mean, I think the downgrade is maybe 2 or 3 points tops from Jalen Hurts down to him. I like the Eagles anyway with Hurts personally, but now that this thing is at 5.5, I think the Eagles can go there and win it outright. I think they're going to all get behind the mustache Gardner Minshew. Minshew had an emotional week this week. He had to do a speech and a eulogy for Mike Leach, his old coach. And, he really was fond of Mike Leach, and who wasn't, right? And I think that factors in a little bit to his momentum here. I like how he came back that first big game last week against the Jets. Now, he did lose the next week at Dallas, but that wasn't his fault. This team gave up over 50 points. He at least put up 32 last week against Dallas. There's some familiarity here. I think the Eagles just are going to want to put it on them. And if there's any team that's got choke in them, it is the Dallas Cowboys. And you just kind of saw this week. You saw it against Green Bay as well, in Green Bay, and one also thing that I like about this is Alex Kemp is the official in this. Alex Kemp, if you look at his average points, it always goes a little bit higher for the away team somehow, when most teams are like 2 or 3, between 1 and 3 points on the home team. So I'm going with the Eagles plus 5.5, and you can get a nice little money line on them, maybe plus 180. I'm just trying to find it right now, plus 195 here on DraftKings.
I would not say no to that. I cashed a ticket against Dallas last week. And they cashed a ticket. Not many people took the Houston Texans plus 17 against Dallas 2 weeks ago. This guy did. Dallas is an overvalued commodity, and this is what Dallas kind of does sometimes. They sometimes don't finish the season strong. We know in the playoffs they've been one and done for years. And I've said this about the defense in particular, which gave up points and let Davis Mills and Jeff Driscoll go up and down the field when they played Houston, which let Trevor Lawrence go up and down the field for the most part last week against Jacksonville. When they don't get when they seal off the pass rush from Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, they take those guys away. They don't let them get the pressure on the quarterback. Suddenly that linebacking core is mediocre. Suddenly that secondary, when Trayvon Diggs is a great player, but he's also a risk taker. He's going to jump routes. He's going to think he can undercut the route, intercept the football. And sometimes when he does that, he gets burned, in coverage, and he lets a receiver get behind him. He plays a very high risk level of cornerback play in the secondary. And it's not always for the better for the Dallas Cowboys. So I think there's some flaws and there's some cracks in the armor with that defense right now. While is actually getting better with Tyron Smith back is huge for the offense, although they did lose the right tackle just recently too. So just when they get one key cog back, they lose another to injury. But I'm not looking to lay points with Dallas. I agree that there's a quarterback in Gardner Minshew that's played a ton of starts in the NFL. He's an experienced starting quarterback. He's been in a bunch of games. He's not going to be, in awe of this opportunity. He's got a lot of weapons around him, a good run game, good receivers in Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. Good offensive line. Rely on that. I think it's a close football game. Divisional underdog. Let's not forget that. Long-term sample size, division underdogs, usually a very good bet, especially late in the season. So I'm with you. I think Philly has the chance for an upset. You mentioned an upset pick for me. Giants would be there. I don't mind Philly. I'd even throw Houston out there. Houston's competing, and Tennessee is just floundering right now. And we've still got to see if Malik Willis is capable of leading a team to victory. His passing has certainly been spotty. We know he can run and move with the football. We saw that at Liberty when he played there in college. But we've still got to see if he can be a effective enough NFL pocket passer. And we just don't know yet. And say what you will about Houston. They lost the last 2 weeks, but they gave Dallas, Kansas City everything they can handle. And they don't look like a team that's tanking here down the stretch. Maybe they want to. Maybe they should. But players aren't right now. I mean, the effort was commendable in the last 2 games for the Texans. And maybe there's a desire to spoil the playoff hopes of the Tennessee Titans because all of a sudden Jacksonville's right on their tail for first place in the AFC South. So I think Houston would be on my list of potential dogs that can win outright.
I love it. I think it's a great one. Malik Willis hasn't proven that he can do anything. It's not hard to stop him right now. They don't have a ton of receivers for Tennessee right now. Obviously, they made that stupid move of getting rid of A.J. Brown, and man, that really pissed Tannehill off when that happened, and he was right. But, it's like Malik Willis is going to come in, and he's going to run the ball. I mean, how predictable is that? It's pretty predictable. Even a guy like Lovie Smith, should be able to figure that one out. And, they Texans played really tough the last couple of weeks, that's for sure. So I like your Giants one, and Houston one's interesting too. I mean, you're getting plus money on a very high variance game. You like that, so no disagreements here. Awesome stuff, man. Ian, thank you so much for coming on this show. You broke down these games fantastically. Lots of agreement here, very slight disagreement. So where could our listeners and viewers get your great information and plays?
Yeah, follow on Twitter @Bobano. Of course, there's links to all the subscription options there in all sports. I post daily on Twitter, records, prices, options, all that. Lots of free content, all my video links, articles daily. Every single video I do, I post it on Twitter. Tons of plays as well on Twitter for free for everybody. Like I said, all my shows and content get posted there daily. Check me out on Pub Sports Radio. I do an NBA show there 3 days a week, college basketball show. Weekdays as well, college football, NFL stuff for Pub Sports Radio as well. And also my everyday NHL betting show, The Ice Guys, 7 days a week, all throughout the NHL season. So lots of ways to watch me. I mean, you might get sick of me, but you definitely won't. There's never going to be a situation where, wow, Ian, you don't do enough shows. There's no ways we can watch you. There are plenty, especially at this time of year.
Absolutely. There most certainly is. Make sure you guys check out Ian. Check me out at theoddsbreakers.com if you want to digest any of our content. We're a heck of a lot more than just a pick site. We give a lot of content for you guys to make your own decisions and obviously help your handicapping skills out there. Every time there's a bowl game, we're going to have something out on it. So make sure you check that out. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this show. If you have any questions, you can tweet Ian at Bobano, tweet us at the Odds Breakers. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and go get some winners.
Thank you for watching Better Odds Sports Betting.